What separates the men who command respect from those who beg for attention? You've seen both. One man walks in and stays grounded. Another walks in and starts performing. And when pressure enters the room, one holds his shape, the other starts bargaining for approval. That difference isn't luck. It isn't genetics. It's knowledge. Because there's a kind of knowledge that changes how you read a moment, how you read a look, how you read a silence. When you have it, confusion stops, the fog lifts, the games lose their grip. You don't get pulled into emotional traps. You recognize the tests before they close, and you stop trading your dignity for temporary affection. Listen closely. This isn't something you let play in the background. It's a turning point, and once you're locked in, I'm going to expose 5 psychological truths most men only learn after the damage is done. Most men walk into a relationship carrying a quiet belief that when a woman says, "I love you," she means she loves you fully. Your strengths, your flaws, your wins, your failures, as if the feeling is sealed, permanent, untouched by circumstance. But pay attention to what happens outside of the words. Watch the temperature. Notice how warmth changes when your income drops. Notice how affection shifts when you stop feeding her constant attention. Notice what happens when the early excitement fades and real life replaces novelty. For many men, this is the moment confusion begins because they interpret a change in behavior as betrayal. What they're experiencing in a lot of cases isn't unconditional love. It's conditional appreciation. Affection that moves on a spectrum tied to what you provide. Security, stability, excitement, status. When those elements are strong, closeness feels effortless. When they weaken, the warmth often weakens with them. This isn't about calling anyone good or bad. It's about recognizing a survival logic, a pull towards safety, a need for provision. Where men get destroyed is not in the existence of conditions. It's in their refusal to see them. They cling to a fantasy that loyalty should guarantee devotion. They believe sacrifice automatically produces reciprocity, so they give energy, time, money, emotional support until their account is empty. And when she pulls back anyway, despite everything they poured in, they stare at the wall and ask the same question: how could my loyalty not be enough? Because loyalty is not a contract that forces another person to stay, and love is not a blank check you sign until your dignity is gone. Here is the shift. Once you accept that much of what is called love can be conditional, you stop moving blindly. You don't become bitter. You don't become cold. You become precise. You stop measuring devotion by sweet language. You start measuring it by consistent action. You stop judging a person when everything is easy. You evaluate what happens when things get difficult. This awareness is not a weapon, it's freedom, because it stops you from over-investing emotionally before someone has earned that access. It teaches you to require reciprocity instead of assuming it. If her affection only appears when your bank account is full, you learn what that affection is built on. If her love rises and falls with your success, you understand the foundation, and when you understand it, you stop being enslaved by it. The man who grasps this truth doesn't close his heart. He guards the gate. He protects his resources, his time, his energy, his devotion. He chooses carefully who earns access to them. And when you live that way, you are no longer desperate for approval. You are no longer blind to the conditions driving behavior. You become intentional, observant, and difficult to manipulate. Because once you see the pattern clearly, you cannot unsee it. Your attention is not a compliment, it's a force. It's the spotlight you control, and whatever you keep under that light grows. Most men don't treat it like power. They treat it like proof. They keep shining it, hoping the brightness will secure closeness. So they become available in every direction, messages without a reason, reassurance without being asked. A steady stream of presence offered before it's earned. Not because they're cruel, not because they're playing a role, because they're trying to lock certainty, but the spotlight doesn't work that way. When it never moves, it stops feeling like a spotlight. It becomes background lighting, and when everything is highlighted, nothing carries weight. That's the pattern. The more you pour attention into someone who hasn't matched it, the less your presence is felt. Not because you're invisible, because you've made yourself predictable. Always there, always ready, always giving the same amount, no matter what you receive. Now listen carefully. Selective attention is not punishment, it's clarity. If your focus is always on someone else, you don't have leverage, you have dependency. The reversal is simple. When your attention becomes deliberate, it becomes meaningful. When it's not automatic, it has weight. And when you stop filling every silence, the silence starts speaking. Silence isn't emptiness, it's information. It shows you who reaches back, who notices, who makes an effort when you're not doing all the work. So don't hand out attention as a way to purchase closeness. Don't spend it like it's unlimited. Place it where it's respected, not where it's merely tolerated. Because once you understand this, your presence changes. You don't need to prove you're there. You choose where you stand. And the moment your attention becomes something you give on purpose, it stops being taken for granted.
If this content makes sense to you, hit the subscribe button. Thanks for your support.
A reactive man is easy to steer, not because he's weak in a dramatic way, because his emotions can be pulled like a handle. That's the difference. Some people don't argue to understand you. They provoke you to move you. The goal isn't the conversation. The goal is the reaction. If withdrawal makes you spiral, it becomes a tool. If drama makes you raise your voice, it becomes a switch. If threats make you bargain, it becomes a leash. You can call it love. You can call it passion. But the effect is the same. You're being guided by pressure. So watch 3 moments. First, withdrawal happens. The silence shows up, and you feel the urge to fill it, to explain, to chase, to fix. Emotional mastery looks different. You stay steady. You don't rush to earn relief. You let the silence sit. Second, the intensity rises. Drama spikes. The room starts to feel loud. A reactive man matches it. He escalates to prove a point. A regulated man slows down. He doesn't climb into the storm. He doesn't trade composure for the feeling of winning. Third, the threat appears. I'm leaving, or some version of it. A line meant to shake you. If fear drives you, you start bargaining. You start negotiating against yourself. Emotional mastery is calm. You answer without panic. You don't plead. You don't perform. You keep your spine. This doesn't mean you don't feel. It doesn't mean you become cold. It means you choose your behavior on purpose, not on impulse. Because the moment your emotions stop being a remote control, the dynamic changes. You become harder to steer, harder to pressure, harder to manipulate. And when that happens, what used to control you loses its grip. You were taught a quiet lie early, that the woman is the prize, that your job is to chase, perform, and prove. And if she pulls away, it means you weren't enough. That belief does one thing to a man. It traps him in scarcity. He starts treating one person's attention like oxygen, so he negotiates against himself. He tolerates what he shouldn't. He stays where respect is thinning, because he's afraid of the silence that comes after. But here's the structure most men refuse to face. Men have options too. The difference is how they're made. A woman's options often arrive. A man's options are built, not wished into existence, not begged for, forged. Forged in the gym, where you learn that comfort is a liar. Forged in work, where competence is earned in years, not claimed in words. Forged in your mind, where you sharpen judgment instead of chasing approval. And forged in purpose, something that doesn't collapse the moment someone is displeased with you. A man who refuses to build himself ends up with fewer choices. And fewer choices creates fear. Fear creates compliance. That's how men get trapped, not by love, by the belief that they have none to spare. Now listen closely. The moment you have real options, a different kind of calm settles in. not arrogance, not cruelty, a quiet freedom. Because when you can walk away, you stop bargaining with your dignity. You stop accepting disrespect as a price of admission. You stop clinging to someone who only feels valuable because you made them your only exit. And something else happens. Pressure tactics lose their teeth. The threat of leaving stops being a weapon. Silence stops being a trap. Guilt stops being a rope. Not because you became cold, but because your life no longer depends on one door staying open. So build, not for attention, for freedom. Discipline your body, earn your competence, deepen your mind, anchor yourself to purpose. When those pieces are real, you don't chase, you choose. And when you choose, fear can't steer you anymore. Self-respect isn't a feeling, it's a structure. It's the line you refuse to step over, especially when you're tempted, not when you're calm. When you're hungry for closeness, when you want to be chosen, when you can feel yourself getting ready to bargain. Most men don't lose their power in one dramatic moment. They give it away in small trades. They exchange standards for access. They trade dignity for the comfort of someone staying. And then they act surprised when they're treated like a convenience. If you want self-respect, stop thinking of it as confidence. It's simpler than that. It's enforcement. You decide what you accept, and you decide what happens when it shows up anyway. So make it concrete. You don't accept insults disguised as emotion, not the "I was just upset" excuse, not the raised voice that turns into a pattern. You don't make room for disrespect because it arrives with tears. You don't normalize broken promises, not the repeated delay, not the apology that changes nothing. When words keep restarting the same cycle, they stop being reassurance. They become noise. And you don't reward inconsistency with more access. If effort appears only when it's convenient, you don't pay it with your time. If presence arrives only when you're about to walk away, you don't call that devotion. You call it timing. This is the part most men avoid, because it costs something. Standards without consequences are decoration. They look good in your head. They do nothing in your life. The moment you enforce a boundary, you learn what's real, not through arguments, not through speeches, through what happens next. Some people adjust, some people leave. Both outcomes are information, and both protect you. Self-respect is the floor. If the floor collapses, nothing you build above it holds. So keep the line clear, keep it quiet, and keep it enforced. Hold that and you'll understand why the games stop working. Because the man who won't betray himself can't be bought. You've been watching the same pattern play out for years. Not because you're blind, because you were trained to look in the wrong place. So don't keep this as information. Stack it. First, the ledger awareness. You stop confusing language for reality. You stop letting sweet words act like proof. You measure what's real by what stays consistent. Second, the spotlight control. Your attention stops being charity. It becomes weight. Your presence stops being constant background noise. It becomes something felt, because it's not handed out automatically. Third, emotional regulation. This is where pressure tactics die. Not because you argue better, because you don't move when someone tries to move you. Your reaction is no longer a handle. Fourth, forged options, not the fantasy of endless choices, real choices you built. And when you know you can walk away, fear stops making decisions for you. That's what freedom actually looks like. And last, self-respect. The floor, the line you don't step over, not when you're lonely, not when you're tempted, not when someone turns warmth into a reward. Now watch what happens when these truths sit inside you at the same time. The usual moves lose their effect. Silence doesn't pull you off your center. Tests don't hook you into proving yourself. Threats don't buy leverage, not because you became cold, because you became clear. There are two kinds of men. One is shaped by pressure. The other shapes the atmosphere. And from this point forward, you don't need to control anyone. You only need to control access, your time, your attention, your energy, your standards. If something you heard exposed your blind spot, keep it, name it, and change one behavior first. Because the moment you stop being steerable, the game ends.